Hello, all you wonderful Authors Love Readers podcast listeners out there. I'm so happy that you're here. Before this episode starts, I want to talk a little bit about Patreon. And the first thing I want to say is we have a charter Patreon supporter, Linda D. I'm so excited that we have a Patreon supporter and that she was the one who broke the ice and started us. And amazingly, then we have two more supporters who came right behind her. We have Jennifer S. and Laura D. We hope more of you will join Lisa, Jennifer, and Laura in becoming a Patreon supporter of Authors Love Readers podcast. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why I'm asking for your support of the podcast through Patreon donations. Let me tell you, it's really hard for me to ask. As my friends would tell you, I'm not good at asking for help at all. The reason that I set up for the Authors Love Readers podcast, it is not for me as an individual author. It's strictly for the podcast. I would love for the podcast to become self-supporting because I've been supporting it to this point. The expenses include having the podcasts edited, because you'll be surprised to know we talk longer than you actually listen. And I have a monthly fee for hosting the files because these are big files. And what I would love is to have people donate, a couple dollars a month would be terrific. $2 a month would be 50 cents an episode. It would be a sign of support and it would help defray some of these costs. So that would be the way I could keep the podcast going on. And I hope you'll consider that. Thank you. Hi. Welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Rebecca Forster, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Authors Love Readers podcast. My guest is Rebecca Forster, and the regular listeners will be just astonished to know that I met Rebecca through Novelists Inc. This tends to be a recurring theme here, Rebecca. And we had lunch with a table full of mystery thrillers, suspense writers, and it was a lot of fun.
It was the best.
Yeah. Rebecca, tell the listeners just a little bit about what you write.
I write legal thrillers, legal procedurals, and police procedurals. So I do thrillers that usually revolve around the law and the justice system with a little bit of politics thrown in now and again.
How do you deal with things changing in those areas, especially if there are rapid changes?
That it's funny you should ask that. That's a good question because, for instance, in California, we have had great changes in the law regarding bail. And so now that's taken away something that I used to use quite a bit as people were waiting for bail. And so because I write about usually California-centric things, these changes really do make a difference. They may not to the reader who might not know the specifics of California law, but because I'm not a lawyer or a judge or a doctor, I like to keep my procedurals as true as possible to what's really happening. So I do stay on top of it. But at some point you have to let a book stand on its own. And if the law has changed, it's changed. And really the book is about the people in the book anyway. So the procedural part is the excitement and the basis. But what we're really looking at are characters against a huge system.
Do you get comments from readers if they're reading a book that came out 4 years ago and things have changed since?
Yeah, actually, most, general readers don't send comments regarding the procedurals. They send comments about, oh, loved it. It was exciting and all that. Yeah. But I do get comments from lawyers and I always have to laugh because I'll get one note one day that says, oh, this is a terrible book. It has nothing to do with the law. And then the next day I'll get a letter from a lawyer saying, you must be a lawyer. This is so spot on. so at some point I kind of have to put my blinders on, but I do have an ace in the hole. My husband is a judge. He, yeah, so he's sort of my in-house research. I do a lot of court watching. I do a lot of active research. So, for instance, I just graduated from the Drug Enforcement Agency's Citizen College. And so I am constantly kind of out in the field looking at things and trying to make sure that I am on target. But if you've ever been to court, you absolutely know that if I wrote about court the way it was, everybody would be asleep. So creative license must be taken.
Absolutely. Keep it going. Now, see, we immediately got off on the writing. I'm going to backtrack now and let the listeners get to know you a little bit as a person. And we're just going to hit you. Well, I'll start with the classic. How about any strong fears, rather? Strange ones too, but strong fears. And do you use them in your books if you have them?
You know what? It's funny. I don't really. I used to be horribly afraid of heights, and then I found out that I had a really strange vertigo problem. And once that was taken care of, everything was fine. I'm still not crazy about heights. The one thing I really dislike are hairpin turns, like in Europe, if you're, in the mountains. Not my favorite thing, but no fear, no. Don't really have a lot of fears. A lot of the themes I do, which is really funny, are things like mother abandonment, which is very strange since I adore my mother. And she's never abandoned me. She's never even lost me. So I don't understand where that comes from. But that would be a recurring theme. Maybe there's some fear in there.
I heard somewhere that some things are referred to as safe danger. Where you're not abandoned by your mother.
Right.
So it's safe for you to explore the emotions of that.
I love that. Oh my gosh. In fact, what a great book title. I claim it. No, I'm just kidding. That is really interesting.
I think so too. But okay. Are you officially calling dibs on that title?
No, you go ahead. Okay. You brought it up. Darn.
Well, I actually think we'll talk.
I have heard that lately people are collaborating. I don't know where I heard that. Oh. No, but that really is that. Thank you very much. I love that. I'm going to incorporate it somewhere, but no, the title's yours.
Okay, let's skip right away. This is totally out of whack, but there was a reader who asks if you could write a book with any other author, living or dead, who would it be?
Okay, I will tell you, and it's back comes a wacky answer. I would write a book with my son. Luckily, he is still with us among the living. He's 31. He and I are very similar in our temperaments. And the weird thing is he's also a writer, and he and I write so similarly. It would be so exciting. And I would love to write with him because he always pushes things to a level I don't think about. And I don't know if it's because he's young, but he's finishing up a nonfiction book about countries that don't exist. And I love his adventure, his sense of adventure. He's written a couple of magical realism and sci-fi books, but I would just kill to write with him. And I have tried to get him to do it. And he's like, sorry, just don't have the time, Mom. To me, he's one of the best writers I have ever come across. And I'm very excited for his nonfiction to be finished.
Now, how is he writing nonfiction about countries that don't exist? They formerly existed?
No, they don't. They are not recognized by the rest of the world. And so what he did was he left this country about 2 years ago, and he lived and worked in places like Iraqi Kurdistan, Somaliland, Transnistria, which I had never heard of, Kosovo, all these different places. He lived there as one of the citizens and experienced how difficult it was in countries where no one recognizes your passports. You're surrounded by countries that do not want you to have independence. I am so admiring of what he did. His book is going to be called You Are Not Here, Countries That Don't Exist. He just landed an incredible agent in London. He is talking to, I can't say any more about it, but it's going to be awesome, and all his hard work will pay off.
That is fascinating. We got way off, but that's good.
I'm sorry.
No, it's it goes as the conversation goes, but I don't want to forget some of these getting to know you questions. So I'm going to come back and ask you on behalf of the listeners, are there any surprising jobs you've held?
I took in sewing for a while.
Oh my goodness.
To make ends meet when we were young. I've worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I was an underage barmaid in Chicago because Chicago doesn't care as long as you're working. I kind of have pretty much done what needed to be done when I was young and my salad days. And I worked in fabric stores. I think we all kind of did that. I was never a proper waitress. I would have made more tips because the bar I worked at, it was truly a bar. It wasn't cocktails, believe me.
Did you grow up in Chicago?
No, I just went to college there, and then I came back home and got my graduate degree here in business and marketing. And I worked in corporate life for 14 years. And while I was doing that, one of my clients was married to an author, and she often disrupted our meetings, which was pretty funny because he liked to hold meetings at his home. And I finally got really frustrated. I'm like, who does that woman think she is? And my secretary leaned over and she says, that's Danielle Steele.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know who she was. I felt so horrible. I'm like, when I found out who she was, I was going, oh my gosh, I should have shown more deference. But anyway, that was a fun job. I traveled all over the world with that job. I worked for advertising agencies, and Danielle's husband was the CEO of a cruise line, and he was my client. So that's a pretty funny story and an interesting job, to be sure.
Now, is that what got you interested in writing, or how did you make the segue to writing?
Well, sort of got me interested. Basically, it became an office joke because I just like an idiot said, oh, I bet I could do that. And so the whole office is like, oh, yeah, well, let's see. So I was actually dared to write my first book. And I thought, I don't have any kids. What the heck? I'll give it a whirl. All I really expected was a thanks, but no thanks. And I ended up selling my first book, and that's it.
Wow.
That's the way I started writing. Yeah. It was weird. It was very weird. And now, of course, I can't imagine doing anything else. It's just like permeates my entire life.
Now, I also sold the first book I submitted, but I always say, especially to aspiring writers, I have had subsequent rejections, plenty.
Oh, I still keep my rejection file. I've got it all. It's meant to ground me. It's very humbling.
So before you took on that dare, were you addicted to stories? Did you have a strong feeling about stories?
Yeah, I was a really and still am, an avid reader. And, I just always had a book in my purse, in my hand. I just love to read. And my first book was sold actually to Harlequin, and I, to this day, have no idea why they bought it. And I was eventually fired from romance because, as the editor said, you keep killing everyone. You've got to stop it, or you can't write here in this genre. And I should have known that where I really felt comfortable was thrillers, because that's what I read. Mm-hmm. I read a lot of nonfiction, true crime. I read a lot of thrillers. But in those days, and this was way, way back, in those days, really, women weren't as welcome in that arena. And I also was hobbled by the fact that I was not a lawyer. So you had Thoreau and you had Grisham. They were all lawyers. You had, who is it? the lady who was the coroner. She writes Scarpetta.
Patricia Cornwell.
Patricia Cornwell. So they all had creds, and I really didn't. So I sort of thought, well, I should write over here because this is what women do, but I can read over here because I really like the thrillers. And finally, after that editor said that, I thought, you know what? I have nothing to lose. And I pitched my first thriller and never looked back. And that's all I do now. So yeah, I was really happy to find that wonderful space.
Now, I have this personal distinction among mysteries, suspense, and thrillers. I'm trying to get the rest of the world to go along with me. So I say that mysteries, it's the who done it, who did it. Suspense, the story question is, are the protagonists going to survive? Thriller is the world going to survive?
Oh, that's very interesting. And by world, I'm assuming you're also talking about, a system such as the legal system. Will it survive the political system, et cetera? Not necessarily the world, literally. Yeah, the world they're in. I think those are all great distinctions. But I do think a lot of times the thriller catch-all can incorporate all three of those things. And I sometimes find it difficult to say, this is a thriller, because there might be elements of psychological suspense and there might be a mystery, especially if you have a courtroom drama. You do have a mystery that has to unfold within the courtroom and hopefully, surprise people at the end. But what you're really doing is fighting against a system. So that, you might have the mystery and the thriller together. But for me, psychological suspense is sort of all on its own. That's a real, like when I look at Gone Girl, something like that, that is such a freaky, suspenseful book that I wouldn't call it anything else. I really wouldn't call it a thriller or a mystery. And yet it incorporates some of those elements. But to me, the overriding element in that was suspense. And for mine, I think thriller does match it a little better because they're also very physical. Having to get yourself physically out of certain situations, dealing with weapons, that kind of thing. So, yeah. So I like your definition very much.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the psychological, there is sort of the, it's the survival of the protagonist, but it's the survival of the protagonist's mental being too.
Yes. Yeah. And the mystery there might be like Gone Girl. I'll never forget reading that twist, halfway through the book where she's still alive. And it just turned my brain upside down. And so we didn't even know there was a mystery of whether she was alive. We were looking at the mystery of, what had he done to her? And that sleight of hand by Gillian Flynn was quite amazing, I thought. And I think that's what makes a great book, no matter what you label it. If there is that sleight of hand that is so seamlessly, like a good magician, seamlessly incorporated, it's just breathtaking. And I think at least I strive for it. I think we all do.
That's terrific. How about earlier in life? Did you have things that you worried about then that now you don't, you look back and think?
Yeah, I actually was kind of shy. When I was in grammar school and high school, my parents were really strict. My dad was really strict, especially. And, it was just, I worried about everything. I worried about, are my grades going to be good enough? I worried about, oh my gosh, what if a boy talks to me? All these strange things. And then when I went to college, I actually made this sort of decision to say, I'm just not going to be this way anymore. And so I tried to be more outgoing, which stuck, which is great. But then I worried about everything about being outgoing. Should I be going to this place? Should I be talking so much? Should I be doing this? Oh my gosh, I'll tell you, the worry stopped at age 42. That was it. I don't know why. I don't know why. And I have a theory. It's because when your children are finally grown and kind of on their own, you know, you look back and you go, okay, I don't have to worry about them in school. I don't have to worry about me showing up somewhere. My life is kind of my own at 42. I know who I am. But boy, before that, I was worry queen. And I think that's going, you go to Catholic schools and the nuns tell you all these things you shouldn't do. And then you go to Catholic high school, and I went to a co-institutional school, so you didn't talk to the boys. They were in a separate building. And it was just, I to this day can feel that sense of, oh, I'll never be good enough. I'll never get married. I'll never do anything worthwhile. My Lord, they did a good job. It was, my little brain was just imploding with worry. And so, but it's good because it kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. You know what I mean? It's like, I do sort of believe if you have too much freedom when you're young, that you're not cautious. And now I probably went overboard with the caution, but eventually it all worked out and everything is amazing. And all those different worries come to play in characters all the time. And I can use them now, but I don't worry about it.
So you grew up in California?
I did. I was born in Missouri, and then my dad got drafted, and we ended up in Fairbanks, Alaska, of all places. And then we came back to Long Beach, California, and I grew up here, and then went back to Chicago for school, and then came back. It just took one really big snowstorm to get me back here, and so yeah, here I've been ever since, and I love it. It's very pretty, but I miss seasons dreadfully.
If your writing were a color, what color would it be?
Oh, whoa. I don't. Wow, that's a tough one. I will say red because I think it's very intense. But I like to think that it's many shades of red because I would hope that the intensity is also marked with the valley times of characterization where you really care about the characters' lives and not just the intensity of a courtroom or the intensity of physical action. Because I really hope that the characters are very real, which means that they have to have a lot of different shades. They can't all be angry all the time. They can't all be sad. They can't all be fearful. Everybody has peaks and valleys. So I will say I am a rainbow of red in the middle and lots of shades.
That's wonderful. And just as you were talking, I was thinking of how interesting red is. I love red too, but
I do too.
Although yellow and orange are probably my very favorite. But the thing about red is you think about its associations. It's associated with violence. It's associated with blood. It's associated with the heart. So that can be much softer. It's associated with joy, I think. And, I think of like cardinals and
absolutely. Oh, Indian weddings where they wear red, to celebrate. It's one of those colors that I think you could, if it was words, you could use it in so many different ways, and it would mean so many different things. And I really like that. I don't like the idea that thrillers always have to be shades of gray and black and taupe. The red, I agree with you. I think the red can conjure up so many different aspects of what we do, because what we do is gather a whole lot of things, emotions and physical attributes and psychological, stances. And we're supposed to weave them all together like a dovetail to make a drawer. And that's why there has to be shading. You can't say it's just red.
Very good point. Very good point. Now, I want to get into some of the other questions that readers have asked. And this one is, do you miss the characters and think about the characters once you've finished a book?
I do, but not constantly. What'll happen is that, and I'm kind of facing that right now, actually, is that I thought the Witness series was done. And I love those characters, and I would talk about them all day long. I think they're so interesting and wonderful. But I really thought the story had been complete in 7 books. And I ended that book by having one character in particular who had never been master of his own fate walking off into a forested area. And I thought the readers would like that to happen, that they could imagine what happened to him after that. And the last probably 2 years, I've had so many requests, what happened to this one character?
Oh.
Well, I went back, and now I'm writing that 8th book, and finding their voices again. I think what paralyzed me for a while was I knew them in my mind, but to write words for them again was proving really difficult. It's like, I thought their voices were done. And so when you have to revisit, I thought I want to do them justice because they mean so much to me. And it took me a long time to write those first words and to really get into it. And now it's funny. Now I'm about 40,000 words in, and suddenly it's like they never left. But I was very worried about not doing them justice and not making their voices authentic. So yeah, I do hear them. I think every character I've ever written, you could ask me about them no matter when, and I'd be like, oh yeah, she was so great. She was blah, 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 or he was blah, blah, blah. And I would know exactly what their life was about. And that's how you write a good character, is you have to know them. Even your villains, they have to have motivation and realism, and you have to have a love for them. And I do. I love them all.
Well, the reader asks how we get our ideas, and she very kindly says for our beautiful stories, and mentions that she's aware of an author who frequently hears the voices, the characters in her head, and somebody else who dreams them. So I want you to talk a little bit about how you get your ideas, and then how you actually start the writing process. And I'm interested in that because of what you just talked about with this book, and getting back into those characters' voices. So
yeah, I don't necessarily start with a character, which is funny. I know most authors do, but I usually start with a concept of something I read that or see on the news, or my husband will come home and maybe make a passing comment about a case, and I start with a concept. So, for instance, Silent Witness is really about fathers' rights. And what triggered the inspiration for that was we had 2 divorces in the family. And everyone, and this is in a very extended family, everyone went directly to the women and consoled them and listened to their stories and vilified the men. And it came to be known later that really one of the men was not, what we were hearing was not reality. And so the concept of justice, even in something as small as a divorce, which is not a great systemic problem, like you're not up against the whole legal system. It is a very personal process. I was fascinated by the knee-jerk reaction of there must only be one side to the story. And so that was the basis for Silent Witness. The basis for Expert Witness was there was a shooting at the courthouse, and it turned out that someone had been, their reputation had just been crushed in court. And it became such an emotional thing that the man could think of no recourse other than to kill the person who did it. And so for me, the concepts begin the whole thing. And then once I have the concept, I start thinking, who is in this passion play? Because everything is about passion. It's about passion for justice. It's about passion for money. It's about passion for, someone you love or someone you hate. And so I always come at it from that. And what kind of voice would be reasonable within this incredible amount of passion and tension? And so then I start looking around at people, and Josie Bates was inspired as a character, was inspired by a judge we know who's 6 feet tall, and she put herself through college on a volleyball scholarship. And so I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting, So Josie is a very physically active heroine, which allows me to put her in situations that perhaps a normal lawyer wouldn't survive in. But she is very athletic, very toned, and she can handle herself. Whereas the Finn O'Brien series, which is my new series, that one was inspired more by the character. And that's inspired by my brother-in-law. He is a Croatian immigrant, came to this country when he was 15. And I was looking around Los Angeles, and I'm dealing with pockets of LA, immigrant pockets of LA, so Little Ethiopia, a couple of different places where I'm setting these books. And I thought, what a great cop this would make, someone who, because he still has his one foot in an old country and his other foot in his new country. When you come at that age to this country, you don't lose, that sense of home you used to have, but you are excited and grateful to be in this place. So he's a wonderful, complex character, and I love him. And as my brother-in-law says, he's damn sexy too. And I'm like, yeah, sure, right.
But, does he tell everybody the character's based on him?
Of course. Yeah, darn right I do. Oh, he is wonderful. He is also a truly manly man in the old sense, the old country, where he will protect those he loves or those who are weaker to the last breath in his body. He is intelligent. He is very self-aware, so he understands his limitations and his strengths, and I think that comes from not just going to a new city within your country, but having to come to a new country where you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture. You came from a place where you didn't have enough food, and suddenly you're in a grocery store that is stock full of it. Now, I didn't make him Croatian. I made him Irish just because I like the Irish. So he's not totally my brother-in-law, but yeah, there's someone I meet in a coffee shop can inspire a character, and I bet you find the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you ever have characters who don't cooperate and so they get kicked out of the book? Do you have ideas that just won't quite pull together and at one time or another? And then what do you do with them? Do you hold on and hope they work later? How do you deal with that when things aren't going quite right?
Yeah, I do hold on to things because Before Her Eyes, for instance, was actually a book that I had started 15 years earlier. And it had stuck with me and stuck with me and stuck with me, but I had not put the right characters in place. They didn't fit the story. The concept and the theme was wonderful. The characters were good, but they didn't belong where I had put them. And so when I'm beating my head against the wall, then I just put it away. But I usually, put it in a little file folder, and if I revisit it and I can see, where I went wrong, I might try again. That particular story had stuck with me and was so vibrant in my head that I knew eventually I would finish it. But there were completely different cast of characters that were in there. Josie, for the Witness series, originally I had made her a sort of feminist attorney, and I thought, this is great. And I had her living in Venice Beach, and I had her living in a condo. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with this book and this character, because it should have been fine. It should have been great. And what I finally realized was, if you're a true feminist attorney, you're not going to have a lot of men in your life. And I happen to like men in my life, and I think they make for a much better book. I didn't want it to be so linear. It was only about women. If I put her in a condo, it would be a security condo. It'd be very difficult for there to be any suspense about, people looking through her windows or breaking into her house. And then I had put her in Venice Beach, which is pretty wild place. You can have your picture taken with an alien, and you can walk down the street and get high just by people smoking dope in their, ground floor apartments. And I thought no self-respecting athletic person would do this. And so I walked the entire length of what they call the Queen's Necklace in the South Bay. And I walked through Manhattan Beach, and I walked through Hermosa Beach. And so when I hit Hermosa Beach, realized that's where the national beach volleyball tournament takes place. And it was nothing but a mile of volleyball nets. I thought, this is where she belongs. It's bright, it's sunny, it's a community. And suddenly she came alive. There was the place she hung out. There was her house on the corner of a busy street. There were her volleyball friends. There was a small courthouse in the South Bay. Suddenly I had blocked her in when I originally had her so rigid with being a feminist attorney, that she needed a life. And once I got to Hermosa Beach, the setting and the lady we knew, those came together and really dictated what she was going to become.
And sometimes I think it's like what you put first for the character. So she can still be feminist, but that's not the first thing that you come to with her.
No, and it's also not a rigid, sometimes I will tend to become very rigid in what I think people should be. And all that is sort of making a caricature of what I really want. What I want are well-rounded people. And if I give them those kinds of labels right off the bat, as opposed to what they do, from the moment they get up in the morning, how do they get dressed? How, what do they do for fun and all that other stuff? I had come at that character completely backwards. Instead of saying she's a lawyer, I said she's a feminist lawyer. And it was wrong. It was just wrong. It wasn't something I could write. It wasn't something I was interested in. And I didn't want her entire being to be taken up with women's issues. Even though the funny thing is, every single book in this series is about women's issues, but it's not, hey, look at this, it's a woman's issue. So
I had a feeling that it would all still be there, but you expressed it in a little different.
And I could feel passionate about it. I couldn't feel passionate about the first rough draft of this woman.
Oh, and you did an entire draft with her. Wow.
No. First draft in my head. No. Oh my gosh, no. But I did do 3 chapters that my agent kept saying, "What is wrong with you?" It's like, I don't know. I can't get her. So it was funny though, when she was finally born, it was so calming and so lovely. And so, all right, now we can go. Let's go. And that felt great.
Yes. Okay. And for the readers, all your contact information will be in the show notes. But now we are going to go to my very favorite part, the rapid fire either ors.
I was just going to say, that worried the heck out of me when I heard your voice drop. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right.
I am
ready.
Secret.
I have my hands
You have no
flat on the
idea
desk.
how revealing these really are.
I'm terrified. Okay. So it's all either or. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible.
Make the watching last as long as possible.
Paper plates or best china?
Oof. Paper plates.
Pickup or sports car?
Sports car.
House decorating or gardening?
House decorating.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint these days.
Day or night?
Day.
Opera or show tunes?
Show tunes.
Mountain or beach?
Mountain.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
Hot air balloon or train trip?
Oh, train.
Afraid of heights? Still
Not crazy about that balloon.
Daisies or roses?
Roses.
Appetizer or dessert?
Appetizer.
Still give you some dessert. Cake or ice cream?
A cake.
Jigsaw puzzle or crossword puzzle?
I'm bad at both. All right, jigsaw.
Heels or slippers?
Oh, heels.
Leggings or sweats?
Sweats.
Nail polish or bare nails?
Bare nails.
Sailboat or motorboat?
I get seasick. Sorry.
Mustard or ketchup?
Mustard.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Winter.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Ooh, cruise, I guess. Cruise.
Last one. Grab the best first or save the best for last?
Save the best for last.
Yay! You did fabulous. You were so good. It's been lots of fun, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you. This was just delightful. And please, if anybody's out there listening, I would love to hear from you. I answer everybody by myself. No assistance here. And just, a joyous thing to read and write. So fabulous.
That's great. So thanks to all the listeners. Hope you'll come back next week for the next episode of Authors Love Readers podcast, and have a very happy week of reading between now and then. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.